Hey guys, I want to talk to you a little bit about tuning today, because I know some of you have had some trouble tuning your instruments, and there are some things that might help you to learn how to tune. First of all, what you need to know is your instruments. I have my viola here. Your instruments, with the exception of the bass, use what they call friction tuning. So on the tuners, there are no pegs. There's no gears or anything on these tuners. They're just held in by friction. So the harder you push the pegs in, they're kind of tapered from small to big. The harder you in, the further they go in, the more tight they get. To compare that to, on my classical guitar, you can see that has gears and a little screw on the tuning peg, so it makes it a little bit easier to see. These are more like bass pegs, bass tuning pegs, so they stay pretty much in tune, minus if the string stretches. They don't really move a whole lot on their own. Your pegs, since your instrument's made out of wood, can actually expand and contract with the moisture in the air and the heat in the air. So that's why sometimes it goes out of tune when you haven't touched it at all. So I'm going to show you how to tune a little bit. Now, all of you except for basses have regular tuners, and then you have fine tuners down here on the bottom. So they do two different things. They're not really meant to be used the same way. The big tuners are for large adjustments. So if your note is really, really off, like I would usually say more than a half step or whole step, it's usually use the big tuners. If it's close, either sharp or flat but close, use the fine tuners. Okay, the fine tuners, it's difficult to see, but they're actually very much like the tuner on a guitar or on a bass, because they're made out of screws. So you can actually adjust a little bit easier, and they stay pretty much where they are. So these are more like guitar tuners, but just smaller. So we have the tuners here. First thing you need to do is figure out your reference. So this is a viola. The lowest note is a C. The lowest open string is a C. So I've got my piano turned on. There's a C, that's my reference pitch. So I'm just going to play, and I know a lot of you tune with the bow, and you reach around like this and tune as you go with the fine tuners. Where I teach elementary school too, I have to tune a lot of kids really fast. So I've gotten used to just tuning it like this so I can pick it up, tune it, hand it back to them. So I'm going to tune it by plucking instead of by the bow. My bridge is a little bit off here. So here's my reference pitch again. That's a C. The first thing you have to do is decide if that's too high or too low based on your reference pitch. In this case, it's too high, and it's not very much higher. I'm going to use the fine tuner. It's only within about a half step. And it's really important you keep playing as you tune. Don't play and then tune and then play and then tune, because you could overshoot it or undershoot it. So play as you tune, as you make an adjustment. Now on violas especially, the C string, as you probably know, goes out of tune really easily. So if you pluck, don't pluck too hard, it'll actually pluck the note sharp. You get that harsh sound. So don't pluck really hard, just pluck it to the sound. Okay. Next would be the G string. Now you could get a reference pitch again for this, but I'm going to tune it based off of the C I already have. It makes it a little bit easier for me to get the instrument itself. So I'm going to play the C, and the G is actually pretty much in tune. A little bit low. I'm using a fine tuner. So it's a fifth. We talked about fifths in a different video, so make sure you know what a fifth sounds like. It sounds like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, the first two notes. That's a fifth. The next ones are also a fifth, and this is different for basses, but all the other ones are fifths. It's pretty close. And don't be afraid to up or down, or both. So if you can't tell if it's too high or too low, adjust it one way, and if it goes wrong, adjust the other. Always try to start with the fine tuners though, because these strings break pretty easily. If you crank too much on a big tuner, they can break pretty easily. Guitar strings and banjos and all the other string instruments that have gear tuners, even basses to some degree, the strings are a little bit stretchier, so you don't have to worry about that so much. They still break sometimes if you go too far, but these are really easy to break. So take your time, use the fine tuners first. If you can't get the fine tuner, then use the big tuner. The last one I know is going to be pretty far out because I already detuned it before I started this. It's only a third, it should be a fifth. So there are two ways you can do it. Again, you can get a reference pitch from the piano. In this case, it would be the A. You see how far we're off, or you can just know it's a fifth up from the D. So far, I'm going to use the big tuning peg, and I'm going to make an adjustment here. It's difficult to adjust as you do this, if you're holding it like I am, but you can still do it. So we're up to a tritone now, which is only a half step down from a fifth. So I'm going to go a little bit more with the main tuner. I'm not going to go all the way up to it with the main tuner. This is what the fine tuners are for. So a tip for those of you who are afraid of breaking strings, make sure you go almost all the way up to it with the big tuners if you have to use the big tuners. But then stop a little bit below it so you can use the fine tuners to get up to it. So I need to get a little further up to A. Then you go about a half step. So I'm going to use the fine tuner to go up to A. A little too far, go back down. And the whole time I'm doing this, I'm checking with my other strings. Especially if you haven't tuned in a while. If you start tuning everything up a whole lot from where it gets tighter, it actually pulls the neck up a little bit because there's more tension on the strings. When it gets pulled up this way, that means this other strings could go a little bit out of tune, go a bit flat, because they would be a little bit looser that way. So even after you tune one, a fairly big difference like that one was, go back and check the other strings and make sure they're in tune. Okay, that's pretty close. Now you can also use a clip-on tuner, or you can use a tuner on your phone. You could start with the A string if you want and work your way down. I know most of you do that. I like to start with the string just because it goes out of tune the easiest, so I like to get that one where I can adjust it from a smaller distance away later on. One last thing, well actually two last things to check. If you have a bridge, mine is a little bit, it's okay. If you have a bridge that is warped or twisted or like bent like this, that means that the strings have been catching on it. And if you look at your strings really carefully, especially somewhere where they go across like the bridge or the nut and they bend, you can see like the lines in the string. So those lines, as you tune, actually pull a little bit on the wood of the bridge. And this wood is really thin and really pliable, so it can actually bend and warp. That's what causes your bridge to warp. So a trick for that is you take a lead pencil and rub some of the lead in the grooves where your strings go through. Slide a little bit easier. That graphite gets in there and lets the string slide back and forth. You out of tune, but when you tune, it doesn't catch on the bridge, the wood of the bridge. And that's for basses and cellos. And the last thing is, if you look at my fine tuners, they're about that far up. Okay, I like to keep my fine tuners out as far as I can and still be in tune, because that way, if I need to adjust, I have room to work with. If they're all the way down, if they're flat against the tailpiece, I only have a choice to use the big tuners, the main tuners. Alright, so if you can keep those fine tuners out some so that you can adjust up if you need to, then that helps you a little bit, gives you a little bit more wiggle with the pitch, and that way you don't have to try to or tuning everything with just the big tuners. I think that's about it as far as tuning goes. So if you have any questions or something you see, just let me know, email me, or put a comment down there so I can know what it is you guys have questions about. Guys, see you next time.